Hunter, welcome to the Salespreneur Podcast. What's up, man?
Not a whole lot, brother. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Hunter, you are the first guest I've had from Iowa. Are there any tech companies in Iowa? I'm like trying to figure this out.
How
did you get into SDR work living in Iowa of all places?
That's a great question. There are more than you'd think. Obviously, there's like ag tech, right? There's like a lot of ag tech companies, especially like at Iowa State University, big agricultural school, and a lot of ag tech. I went to a trade show a couple of weeks ago. It was the Land Expo. Those are the types of trade shows we have in Iowa, the Land Expos. And I went specifically to see like who the vendors were and like if there would be any potential prospects for me there, because if they're at trade shows, maybe they're making cold calls, or maybe they're not making cold calls and they should be.
That's
and
exciting.
It was I was surprised. I was actually surprised. Like there were some cool companies. But yeah, I got started just with a digital marketing company based in Iowa City when I was going to school over here, and was doing full cycle sales executive work. We were selling digital marketing software to retailers. I was making dials every day with my iPhone, helped close some deals right away. And that was kind of the start.
That's super exciting. I grew up in Idaho, and
Okay.
I feel like a lot of people confuse us because if I go somewhere traveling and they're like, "Oh, where are you from?" I'm like, "Idaho." They're like, "Oh, wait, Iowa? Like, is that corn?" And I'm like, "Wait, no. Like Idaho, it's potatoes. Another ag state, another
Yeah, right.
desert plain."
And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I realized like how like it's actually kind of interesting, because I started to get like more interested in like real estate, like learning about real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like looking around at these cornfields, and I was just like, dude, this is just income producing land. Like this is just income. And a guy I met like when I was pretty young, I was probably like 17, 18. He was a big property developer in Des Moines, and one of his best friends was this guy named Lamar Kothi. And Lamar, super wealthy, has a house shaped like a spaceship, and he owns just thousands of acres of farmland. I think his income off his cropland is like $5 million a year. But he actually outsold Zig Ziglar as a door-to-door salesperson selling pots and pans back when he was in his 20s. And I just thought that was like the most interesting story in the world. I was like, really? Like the Zig Ziglar? And I looked it up, and sure enough, like you can go dig it up, and Lamar Kothi was listed. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Wow.
So there's some talent in Iowa.
Okay.
There's some folks here.
Yeah, I would have never known that. You have somebody that beat the Zig Ziglar.
Yeah, right.
Selling doors. Yeah. That's cool. Well, Hunter, I am super excited to have you on the show. Obviously, the goal for me here is to learn easy ways to start a business and help other, listeners do the same thing. I think what you've done is really cool, being able to find a business that you're able to start on your own without taking on tons of debt or partners, stuff of that nature. So that being said, you mind giving me like a little bit more of an introduction to your sales background and what you're doing at RevCentric?
Yeah, sure. So I got started. So like my first sales job ever, if you really want to go back to the beginning, I moved to a new high school when I was like 14, and I'd always lived in the country. And so now I had like neighbors. And so I like my first thought was just like what can I sell these people? Like, can I go knock doors? Can I go mow their lawns? Whatever. And I had this like big fantasy of like starting a lawn care company, right? I think I read like what was that book? Lawn Boy. You ever read Lawn Boy?
No.
Okay, well, he started a lawn care company one summer, and then next thing you knew, he had like 30 employees, and he had a mentor that had him buy a certain stock, and he like became a millionaire in high school. And so like read that book when I was in middle school. So when I moved to a new high school and I had neighbors, I was like, oh, I'm going to start a lawn empire. Got a few clients, like, just knocking on doors, putting out flyers and stuff like that. Ended up jumping ship and going in and ripping up carpet because it paid $18 an hour. And like my young adolescent mind at the time didn't realize that like you could make way more money just like growing the lawn care business. Like you don't need money anyway. You live at home and your parents pay for everything. So should have just kept trying to grow the business. But that was like my first kind of forte into like entrepreneurship. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I ended up getting a job at a digital marketing company when I was in college after wanting to start my own and never really like getting it off the ground. You know, I had seen like the E-Man Gajis of the world and stuff on YouTube and was just like, oh, I could do this. And I guess before that, I had graduated high school a semester early and I got my life and health insurance license. And I spent like 6 months straight just like banging the phone, like pursuit of happiness style, like phone to the ear, corded desk phone, at this little independent brokerage where like a couple people were making money, but my mentor, it was like his stepdad and his mom and him that worked there, and he was going through a divorce, and just like it was a complete mess. So I spent like 6 months dialing the phone and like hundreds of calls a day, crossing them off the list. Told no. I sold one policy, made like $1,000 commission. That was it. My whole goal was to not have to go to college. Like I wanted to like get this thing enough traction. Like I wouldn't have to go to college. I never wanted to go to college. Didn't get enough traction. So then I ended up going to, like, that was like my agreement with my dad was like, I'll go to college if I don't get this thing off the ground. So I wanted to start a digital marketing agency. I was learning about marketing as I was trying to get this insurance thing going, and just started coming across people doing Facebook ads and all this other stuff. And I was like, oh, I could probably like figure this out and do it. This seems more interesting than selling insurance. And just didn't really, nothing really materialized. I wasn't committed to the idea, to making it happen. Would get prospects, people on the line, and then just kind of like not follow up with them, not take things seriously, not actually try to like close deals. And then, I got a job at a digital marketing company, full cycle sales executive, helped them close a couple deals within like my first month of being there, making dials on my iPhone, sending emails. We were selling digital marketing software to retailers. During that time, I, called one of these prospects, and they mentioned that they knew what their return of their digital advertising was on their in-store purchases. And I just thought that was like super fascinating because we weren't offering that. And so I ended up going back to the founder of the company and being like, dude, like we got to figure out offline conversions. We got to figure out, because you could track offline conversions from Facebook via like an API with their phone number and email. And so he ended up building a software to solve that problem. And then COVID hit, and things just kind of like blew up and were stagnant for a long time. So I ended up leaving that company. First lesson learned, like just wait it out, like should have stayed. They're doing great now. Would have been the guy who was hired after me that I trained became the CEO. So like I should have just like pushed through the pain and not left after having like started something and like helped grow something like that. I was the only sales guy there. It was the CEO and me in this like small little co-working space back to back. And I was making dials and he was building ad campaigns for the clients. And that was kind of the start. Like I used that experience to get a job with a big SDR agency because I had experience. I did well in the interview process. We had 100 full-time equivalents. We built inside sales development teams and customer-facing teams for vertical market, SaaS, and fast-growing tech companies, basically. Worked with some pretty big names, Awardco, BlockFi, Heal, like venture-backed, Series B, C type companies. And because I did really well in their interview process, because I was experienced, I got put on their new business development team. I was the only rep on their new business development team, which was weird because we had 100 reps on like all these different client accounts. But go ahead.
So tell me about that. You were working for one of these big agencies and they were doing fractional SDR work?
So it wasn't really fractional SDR work. We were like a talent partner essentially, because we didn't handle the strategy, we didn't handle the scripting, we didn't handle the systems. Basically, what they were really good at, what we were really good at, is called Bandolier. They're still around today. They ended up selling the company, but I still think they do the same thing. What we were really good at was hiring, training, developing entry-level sales development talent. Like they just had a recruiting engine that just like churned out high-level sales development reps. Where they could bring someone in that had never done this before, and in 2 weeks, like have them like in a good place to be on the phone. So like they had built an awesome operations process, and then they would basically just assign them to a client account, but it wasn't fractional because it was like they were paying us for a full-time equivalent. So we were paying the reps at Bandolier, $30K a year, and we were charging our clients like $70 per head. And then wow. we would give them a person basically, that they could plug in to their system. So we didn't really have any input into the go-to-market strategy. We were just really good at hiring entry-level talent. And so we would solve that problem of not being able to hire fast enough, not having the manpower to manage, and having to deal with churn. Those were like the main things that we solved as a company. And yeah, so I worked with those guys for a little while, helped them close a couple pretty considerable deals. Like one of them was a company called Awardco, and we hired 8 reps, which was like, I think the biggest client that they ended up closing on like a sales development type client. BlockFi had like 20 with us. Wow. And then another one right before I left, but all day I was looking at companies that were hiring for SDRs, and I was making like 30K. It's just like, I could go work for one of these companies and make double what I'm making with you guys and have like probably more career trajectory. So I just ended up leaving. Yeah.
And so fast forward, you're working for this company, you kind of see how they do operationally at scaling up talented SDRs. They can go and be assigned to these different companies. At what point did you say to yourself, I think I can go do this on my own?
So it wasn't until like, it was like 6 months after I left Bandolier that I started with a SaaS company on like doing this. I had taken the job as an AE with a venture-backed company called Civic Eye before that. It was business to government, case management software for prosecutors. It was like a drag. Like I went to a lot of trade shows and it was not very fun. You're trying to sell software to prosecutors. You can't cold call prosecutors. You can't cold email prosecutors. And that was like what I was good at, was those two things. So I just took the job on a purely like, oh, the base is like 2.5 times what I was earning at Bandolier. This will be great. And it was just like, dude, this is miserable. This is completely miserable. So while I was doing that, I found there was an old software company who I happened to have a conversation with the CEO. I've done a lot of different things. Like part of my issue at the beginning was like I was very unfocused. So while I was working at Civic Eye, I took an unpaid internship with this independent sponsor in the private equity space, just because I was like interested in private equity and I wanted to learn more about it. Basically, all I had to do was monitor the email campaigns that they were running, and they were doing the campaigns and would book meetings with the companies that were interested in having a conversation about being acquired. Well, one of them happened to be this company called Microestimating, which was a software company, which was outside of their ICP. So I get on a call with this guy and I'm talking to him and stuff. And I'm like, Ron, it sounds like you need to build a sales development team. And he was just like, yeah, actually that is kind of like the stage that we're at. And I was like, fantastic. I think I know a guy that can help you do that. And that's literally like, I just pitched him. I pivoted, pitched him on it. They hired me to come in, hire, train 3 reps to start, and then one ended up quitting. And yeah, I got hired on a contract basis, and I was like, I'm going to use this as a case study, no matter what happens, to go out and get more clients.
So how much did you make off that first contract?
They were paying me, I think I ended up making like 50 or 60.
Wow.
They were paying me like $9,000 a month.
Wow. And so you did.
So I went from 30K that year to I ended the year with a $9K a month contract.
Goodness.
I was making $2,500 a month to start 2020, and I ended 2022 with a contract that was going to pay me $9,000 a month. So it was quite the jump.
And so were you able to drive pretty decent results for them?
Yeah, from a business, from what I was supposed to do standpoint, like booking meetings. Yeah, hired 3 reps, trained them up, had them on the phones within 2 weeks, drove well over $2 million in pipeline, booked 70 plus meetings, sent out 60 proposals. What ends up happening with a lot of companies when they aren't doing outbound and don't have a successful conversion process is they get stuck in the theory of constraints, right? Where like you solve one problem for them and then they realize that's not actually their problem. Like their problem was not that the problem was not the ability to book meetings. Like they didn't have meetings at the time. We came in, booked them meetings. The problem was that they hadn't updated their UI in 15 years and they had a 40-year-old software product that like didn't meet the needs of the market anymore. And so they just weren't able to close deals and just couldn't justify the cost of outbound anymore. Tried to lower my prices on them a few times and they just pulled the plug.
So, okay, so you get this one contract and you start up RevCentric. Who are the customers that you're targeting now?
Similar, vertical market, B2B SaaS, B2B service and SaaS. It's a lot easier if they're going after like some sort of like a well-defined vertical market. So it's like estimating software for machine shops, CRM system for contractors, um, real estate software for like property managers, right? Like vertical market versus like a service company, or like look like a ClickUp, right? Like a ClickUp would be a horizontal market. Like they could serve a dozen industries.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that I feel like it's easy to come in and make an impact for are vertical market SaaS companies. And the ones that I'm good at are like the ones that go after blue collar industries, because I can, from Iowa, Midwest, like I can talk to those guys a little bit better than I can talk to like a CTO or someone in data or like a CISO, right?
Sure.
Like maybe I could figure it out, but I'm much better talking to like a GM of a manufacturing company than I am a CISO at a like large like cloud. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's an up and coming tech company. So that's really interesting, because I feel like there's a lot of those verticalized companies that may not have an outbound motion already set. We
Mm-hmm.
actually had Braxton Porter. He runs an SDR shop as well, and he shared some of his insights on people that he targets. So what makes your outreach special or different? Like, what kind of value prop do you bring to some of these vertical SaaS or verticalized companies?
Yeah. So what I kind of realized was like I had two ways that I could go with the RevCentric. Like I could either from the very beginning try to be a bandolier, which is where like we just played the hiring talent game. Like we'll go out and build you an SDR team, you handle the systems, the scripting, and the strategy. So like basically we just give you a body. And then that could be a model. Or the model could be like we actually like help you build an efficient, like capital efficient go to market motion. Um, and so I kind of decided on like the latter, where rather than like hiring SDRs to go to market for them and then like having to like train, manage, put an operation, like all that stuff, I would just be the SDR. I would be the SDR for them, but I would work in an extremely efficient and leveraged manner. And that's the way that I've done it primarily. So now like I know that I personally can work on 3 accounts at a time. Like right now, I'm balancing 3 clients at once, right? And then I'm doing email for a few others, and it's just me. And then I have like a small VA team that helps out with some email stuff. And I think that's the reason that I went that way, was because I wanted to understand how to like be more efficient as an SDR, how to build someone a more efficient SDR team, rather than just giving them bodies and telling them to go figure it out themselves. I've always been like very interested in like what makes the go-to-market motion work. And so like when I go talk to a company right now, I basically just tell them like I am the SDR. Like I'm a contract SDR on your account. Like I work for you guys. And eventually it'll scale beyond me. But right now that's sort of what differentiates me. Like when I'm talking to them, like they know I'm going to be the one calling for them. It's not going to be like some random person that I hire or somebody in the, I mean, God bless them, like the Philippines, those guys are great. But a lot of companies get cold feet when they hear that type of stuff. But when they're having a conversation with me, like they don't quite feel that way. So then I had to become more efficient and more leveraged as an SDR to be able to work with multiple clients at a time.
So when you, two questions, maybe we'll start with the first one. How do you find these businesses to work with?
Yeah, I mean, just build a list, call them up, email them, LinkedIn outreach. I usually focus on like a dream 100. Like that's what I started with. Like I knew that I understood the manufacturing space. So then I started looking at other companies that were in the manufacturing space. Like what are all the other things that a machine shop buys from a software perspective? They buy machine monitoring software, they buy software, or they buy robotics, they buy quality management systems, they buy lubricants for their machines, right? Like maybe it's not just software. They also buy like other stuff, B2B. They buy cameras to track their workers. There's competitors to who I've worked with, right? So I started asking myself, like, what are things people buy before, during, after, instead of my product or service, or alongside what I have experience in? And that was where I had success initially. Like my first client right after Microestimating was another software that was literally serving the exact same market because I could speak the language. I knew what my dial to connect rate was. I knew what my connector meeting rate was. I could model out what it was likely to look like for them. And it was pretty accurate in terms of the results we produced.
So is your main outreach just in behalf of customers? Is it mainly email and cold calls?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And then you outreach a company, you pitch them on the idea, you tell them, hey, I'm your SDR, you're going to work with me, I'm going to book your meetings, all these things. How do you structure an agreement with them?
Yes, that's a good question. So a lot of people do this on like a per meeting basis, or if they charge a retainer or just a base, it's basically like you have a job. And I never wanted them to think that I was trading my hours for what they were getting. So like I never tell a client that like I'm a fractional SDR. Like I don't want them to think I want them to think they're getting the same result that they would be getting if they hired somebody full time, because I'm going to charge them basically what they would pay a full-time SDR, maybe a little bit less when you account for like benefits and tech and all that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. So there's two ways to think about it. If the client can close deals and I feel like very confident that they'll close deals, I usually do some sort of like a base against a percentage of the revenue. My favorite method that I found so far that like protects me the most is, and is an easy sell for the client, is charging based on what I call controllable outcomes, which the outcome that you can control as a rep at the end of the day is how many conversations you actually have with targets in the market. And so nobody is just going to pay you to make calls. You can't charge per call. Even though you can control how many calls you make, no one's just going to pay you to make 100 calls, because if you make 100 calls and you don't talk to anybody, like you could fudge that all day and they're not going to pay for that. The real metric that's important is reaching a target in the market. So actually having a completed conversation being defined as any conversation that you reach Clay and you have a conversation, and it could result in not interested. It could result in follow up with me in 6 months. It could result in, piss off. It could result in meeting booked. And those are all completed conversations. And that's what I charge clients for.
How do you share that with them?
It's all recorded via whatever calling tool I'm using. I use Apollo for everything. And that's the other important thing, is I always bring my own tech to the plate, because I don't want my clients to have to pay for my technology, because then they're going to go out and choose whatever they think is best, or they're going to plug me into some system that I don't know how to use, or is maybe just like an incumbent process. So I just always bring the process to the table, and I always bring my technology to the table, or a seat of whatever I want to use, which is mainly Apollo for the dialing, and I use Trellis for my dialer. And then I can build their lists, I can build their sequences, I can make their dials, I can send their emails. I can get very efficient because it's all about being efficient. And so I can get very efficient over time using a couple tools, rather than like showing up and they're like, hey, I want you to use HubSpot. Right. And the next guy is like, we use SalesLoft. And then the next guy is like, well, we send emails out of Reply and we make dials out of Lemlist. And I'm like, no, I use Apollo. I'll bring Apollo to the table, integrate it with whatever CRM system you guys are using. If that doesn't work for you, it's fine. I'll move on to the next client. I don't have to work with you guys. But most people are pretty open to that.
And so these businesses, do they have sales reps already, and you're just calling to like book meetings for the sales reps or for the account managers over there?
Yeah. So sometimes they always have like account executives or a closer or somebody that's gonna close the deals, whether it be the CEO, the founder. They have an AE. I work with one client who has 160 employees. They have 7 other BDRs, and they have 7 other BDRs, and they have 8 AEs. And so I handle like a region for them. I'm just like an SDR, BDR on their team, but I don't have to live in Boston or San Francisco, and I don't have to use their tech stack. I still brought my own tech stack to the table, and I still got an instance of their. I run the same exact process with these guys. They still pay me per completed conversation. They don't pay any of their other reps per completed conversation. They pay them based on pipeline and revenue, or pipeline generated and meetings booked. And
how do you determine what to charge per completed conversation?
I just try to think about it in terms of like, what are they paying an SDR right now? I want to earn something similar to that. I also want to book a similar amount of meetings to what their other reps are booking. So the first I try to find out like, how many conversations is it taking if I don't know their market and they have reps in the market making dials right now? How many connections is it taking to get a meeting? What's your dial to connect rate? What's your connect to meeting rate? What's your meeting show up rate, right? I want to know those numbers ahead of time, because then I can kind of reverse engineer like, okay, and what's the standard for an SDR? We want SDRs to book at least 20 meetings per month, and you have a 10% connect to meeting rate. So I need to go out and have 200 completed conversations per month. And you pay SDRs a base right now of $60K plus their tech, plus the office space, plus their benefits, plus their equity in the company, their options or whatever, and plus their OTE and like their bonuses and stuff like that. So then I kind of just like reverse engineer it, and usually it's somewhere between $40 and $80 per completed conversation. Depends on the market size, how big's their TAM, how many completed conversations can I realistically have on a monthly basis for them. Like if there's people in their market, like I had one prospect I was considering working with who they're selling a scheduling software to additive manufacturers, 3D printing companies. Their average deal size was like $250,000. There's only 1,500 additive manufacturers in the country. And so it's like, I have to charge them more per completed conversation because the conversation's worth more to them than it is to someone who has 20,000 prospects in their market and they're selling something that's between $15,000 and $50,000. And I can, it's usually it comes out to be 40 to 80. I usually charge a client somewhere in the realm of $5,000 to $7,000 a month to do cold calling.
Wow. And so when you structure this agreement, do you just send a contract over?
I've got a whole proposal built in Canva that I whipped up. Goes through the whole structure of the process. Try to be as professional as possible, right? Like I do want them to think of me as a business at the end of the day, not just an employee. So I do have like a proposal and like these are the problems with outbound. These are the problems we're solving. This is the infrastructure we use. This is how we track our metrics, our reporting, and by our I mean mine, right? Like this is how I track my metrics, my reporting. This is what you're going to see. This is what you can expect out of me. And then it's got like some contractual agreements about what a completed conversation is and stuff like that.
How do you manage expectations? Because I'm sure that you have founders or you have CEOs or business people that they hire you on and they want very specific results. And if you don't meet those, then it really sucks. How do you manage to have good expectations and help your clients feel like they're getting what they want out of you?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason that I price it the way that I do is on completed conversations, because it's like if you have something that the market wants and I go out and have conversations with people in the market, like I'm a trained SDR, like I know how to talk to people on the phone. I know the structure. Like I've done this in multiple industries. I know how to book meetings. I know how to find problems, not push products. I know how to ask the right questions, clarify, probe, book the meetings, right? So like if you have something that the market wants, the byproduct of me having completed conversations with people in the market is going to be meetings. It's going to be activated leads, people who want more information, and it's going to be meetings. So it's just setting the expectations up front of like, I don't know how many meetings I'm going to go book for you. I have no idea. I know that I'm going to go out and have 200 completed conversations. I know that with other clients that I've had 200 completed conversations a month for, we've had a 7% connect to meeting rate. So if we assume that's going to be true for you, do you believe, Mr. Client, that the market has something, that you have something the market wants? Of course. Can you close deals? Of course. Great. So I'm going to go out and have 150 completed conversations for you. And the result of that will be meetings. And then after month one, we can make some tweaks or changes to the script if need be, or we can go after different areas of the market or different niches. If results ever start to drop, then usually it's a case of the claim that you're making to the market. What are you actually iterating to the prospect over the phone? Like I worked with one client, we booked 15% of everyone that we talked to into a meeting. Worked with another client in the exact same market that we booked 4% of everybody that we talked to into a meeting, because people wanted the one that we booked 15%. They didn't want the other one. The claim was way different. The claim was way stronger. So like client B should have just gone out and like stopped what they were doing, quite frankly, and just built what client A had, but didn't have the technological resources to build it, because they would have had way higher resonancy in the market. And that's just kind of how I set the expectation, is like, look, I'm going to go have completed conversations. If you have something the market wants, meetings are going to be a byproduct. If you don't, you're going to know. You're going to know at least what you can expect from outbound moving forward. So it's a test. First 3 months are a test. That's how I position it.
That's awesome. I know on LinkedIn you post a decent amount about helping other SDRs make 100K plus without having to do a W-2.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help people start that side hustle?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's understanding where do I have expertise? What markets do I understand? Like I understood manufacturing, right? After working with micro for a while. I've coached just last month alone, probably coached like 10 or 15 reps on like through this process and took a lot more. Those were like paid coaching calls. In terms of like free coaching calls, it was probably like another 20. So I dove deep with a lot of folks on like, how should you go out and do this? Well, first, you got to like make a commitment that you're going to go out and actually like do it. You're not, it's like me trying to start the painting company and not being committed to starting the painting company. Like, could have made the painting company a multi-million-dollar business, but I wasn't committed at the end of the day. I didn't actually want to make it happen. So be committed, make sure this is something you want to do. Go soul searching. Like if you don't like making cold calls or you I don't necessarily love making cold calls, but when you're working with multiple clients and making more than you would just working for one client or one company, it gets a little bit more fun. So be committed, understand where you have expertise or where you have industry experience or what markets you're good at talking to. Is it CFOs? Is it CISOs? Is it IT services? Is it whatever? Go find something tangential to what you do now that's non-competitive and spend some time prospecting every day. Talk to people, understand your numbers so you can articulate them to potential clients or prospects and show that you understand the industry. And then control the process, control the operations. Don't just get plugged into their system because then you have no leverage and you won't be efficient. Charge based on outcomes that you can control, controllable outcome based pricing. And then once you're making good money or you feel confident that you can go out and get more clients or you close 2 clients and you're making more than you are at your W-2, jump ship if that's what you feel comfortable doing. There's other benefits of being employed, like being self-employed. Like I have the privilege of like not having a family and like being young and like just having these other things that like kind of play into this, right? Where it's makes sense for me to kind of like take the risk. But some people it doesn't. I also hate being employed by people. Like I can't stand the idea of I can't stand the idea of having a job or being a W-2 employee. I'm way too like hard-headed. That's why I control the process when I go work with my clients because like I think I'm right in a lot of ways when I'm probably not all the time, but I like to think I am, and that got me in trouble a lot as an employee.
Yeah, you hear that a lot from entrepreneurs that aren't able to really like stick with the company because they want to just fly their way, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
I've
that was
definitely
me.
heard that more than once. But have you been able to actually help SDRs make 6 figures just doing exactly what you're doing?
I mean, I've been coaching now for like a month,
Oh,
like
okay, cool. So this is like
yeah, it's like brand new.
starting to share some of your
Mm-hmm.
insights.
Yeah, 2023 was the first like full year that I was like employed by myself, like fully self-employed. And then it wasn't until probably February 1st that I was just like, I'm just going to start like pumping out content about this on LinkedIn. Because I think that people who are like some of the first posts I made that I like got like beef from people for was like, if you're a good SDR, you should consider working for yourself. And then there's like some other stuff that I wrote on it, and then people said like, well, what's a good SDR? And I was like, if you've been hitting quota and crushing it for like 6 to 12 months, like you're good. You know what I mean? Like you don't necessarily need more than that to like understand the SDR thing. Especially if you're a tech SDR, like you realize how much more you know about like using technology to be an efficient business development person than like every other industry. As Justin Michael puts it, right? Like your TQ, your technology quotient is so much higher than like somebody that does manufacturing sales or somebody that does like cold calling for real estate or someone that does cold calling. Like it's just crazy from what I've seen anyway. So yeah, I've only been doing the coaching stuff for like a month or so. I've got a couple folks that are like, they're booking meetings for themselves. They're talking to potential clients, but yeah, nobody that's like really completely replicated what I have so far. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have some folks that are knocking it out of the park as well.
That's super incredible. Well, Hunter, I know that I've picked up some really fun nuggets just from this conversation that get me really excited. But one last question before I let you jump off.
Yeah.
People listening to this podcast are eager to go and try and learn something new to be an entrepreneur. And so I always love to ask if you could give one piece of advice to somebody in seat that wants to go start their own business. What would that be?
Yeah, I mean, stick to what you're good at, right? Like if you send cold emails right now, like that's what you're doing as an SDR, do something cold email related. That's way more scalable than cold calling anyway. But if you're good at cold calling, like don't try to go offer cold email to people. Like do cold calling for them. Just do it in a different way. Become leveraged, become more efficient, and stick to something that you're good at the beginning. In my opinion, anyway, it's a lot easier to start a business when you just take what you're doing as a W-2. What your company is literally paying you to perform a service. They're paying you to perform a task, to do something for them. It's no different than what a client pays you for. They're just paying you to perform a service and to do something for them. You just get to be more in control when you work with a client instead of an employer. And so start something that's in your wheelhouse, that's in your realm. And I think you have a much better chance of being successful.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thanks for that advice and for being a part of the show. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it,
absolutely.
Hunter.
Loved it. It was great. Thanks for having me on.